Hi, my name is Michael Chikeen. The smartest people I've met have one common belief, that us silly humans really don't know much. For example, we still don't know why planes stay in the air, or how Tylenol or even gravity works. Yeah, gravity. Look it up. In today's distracted, clickbait, misinformation age, I wish we could all be less certain, more humble, and a lot more curious. Admittedly, I've been known to struggle with all three. So no more, no less, this show is my attempt to be that change. Thanks for joining me, and here we go. Hey everybody. Welcome back to No More, No Less. I'm Michael Chikeen, and today in the virtual studio, I have with me Philip Folsom. Philip is an anthropologist, Army veteran, and co-founder of the critically acclaimed Valor Resiliency Program for veterans, first responders, and other men and women in high-stress fields. Philip is recognized as an industry leader in organizational culture development and resiliency. He lectures at USC Marshall and provides leadership development classes to the Master of Business for Veterans program. Philip is also the president of Wolf Tribe, a consultancy agency that delivers transformational leadership and culture development programs to major organizations such as SpaceX, Google, Disney, and Red Bull, where he sits on their high-performance board. So I'm hoping by the end of this chat, all of us will feel like we've leveled up our mental and emotional resilience for the rest of our lives, or even the rest of this week. Either way, Philip, welcome to the show.
Thank you, brother. Fun. Looking forward to this one.
Me too. So I guess let's start at the beginning so we can get a good idea of where you've come from on this journey. And so what experiences in your life led you to being a leader in the field of resiliency training?
It like every heroic journey, it's driven by some wound, right? And that's passion. The term passion does not mean heightened emotion. It means what you're willing to suffer for. So the passion of the Christ is when he was crucified. And so passion is the thing that you're so driven to do that you're willing to undertake adversity and challenge. And usually it's forced. It's some need we have to fix a problem or a wound or something. So that was my story. And we all have, if we go back upstream to the source of why we're doing what we're doing, it's because we either have a fear of abandonment or inadequacy. It's going to come down to one of those two things. So, my story of kind of growing up with a lot of what's referred to as adverse childhood experiences. And it's an important term for all of us in the resiliency space, is that we all had trauma growing up, and it's either, small trauma or, capital T trauma,
right?
Poverty, neglect, there's a whole host of things. And you really can't compare them together. For a wealthy person to have their toys taken or to be grounded or have their phone taken away, that triggers the same shit in our brain that, if you're in a war-torn state or whatever, So we all have these experiences when we're young, usually under the age of 8. And so if you go upstream and go, all right, was I ever have the experience of being abandoned by my caretakers? Right. So that could have been loving parents that just both worked. Mm-hmm. And they didn't realize that, I have an abandonment wound from that. Or I'm being compared to siblings or peers or grades or whatever it is, and I feel inadequate. And those two core wounds kind of echo down through our worldview and our belief system and our understanding of how the world works. So we all have that. And right. It's a really important source for all of us to look at what are our kind of core birth of our operating system. And so for me, it was, a lot of inadequacy. I grew up poor, dad left early. There was a lot of stuff that didn't set me up to be successful. And so I was not successful. And I went into the military as a means of escape. And that was something that was available to me. So it wasn't purely patriotic, like we always think of, he's called to serve. Right. It's like most of the folks who are in the military are there because there's structure and there's opportunity and they're accepting. It's a tribe. The military is the largest tribe in the history of the world. And they will, if as long as you're willing to abide by their very clear stated shared values, vision for the future, shared mission, if you can abide to a military lifestyle, they'll take you. And we learn a lot. So, I learned that anything another man can do, I can do. I never had that awareness. And if I see, the guy in the world now who's in shape or made money or has a great marriage or, keeps his car clean or whatever it is, I'm like, I can do that. Whereas before, it was, well, those are the winners and I'm not a winner. Or those are the people who are just born with this success program that I don't have, which is not true, And so the military was very good for me. And I recommend any type of experience for young men in particular. Team sports is another tribal organization. A martial arts school.
Right.
You gotta have an experience of being embedded in what's called an honor-based culture. Like they're really important because it's tribal at its core. And this is going to get into resiliency and initiation, but we'll kind of sidebar that till we dig into that.
Well, actually, I wouldn't mind in the middle to ask you a question on this because I've been talking about this with friends a lot recently. This whole idea of resiliency, but also, this now we're all more aware that we've been neglected or trauma to various degrees, like you said, but also this idea of therapy. And I think a lot of us, it sounds like you included, see the benefit of it, but friends and I have been speaking about, okay, but when is there diminishing returns when it leads to victimhood and the lack of agency? And it sounds like that's what you're saying with these tribes you've been part of with the military or professional or not professional competitive sports. And I think a lot of people, if you lose that sense of agency, you think everything is put upon you and you have no ability to change your lot in life. Is that kind of what you were alluding to?
Yeah, that is the classic adolescent psychology of the uninitiated man, right? Okay. And I'm kind of speaking to the men's world now, although I know there are women watching this too. We both require initiation. We both require belonging and resiliency, but we're kind of having a masculine conversation, which is important because it's half the world. So men have different initiation needs than women do. But they both entail the movement from an adolescent psychology, which includes what you're speaking to of there's victim consciousness. There are villains who are perpetrating that, negative experience on the victims. And then there are savior characters who are going to somehow come in and solve your problems. And so that little Dharma wheel that cycles, through, I'm not going to be a victim anymore. And you kind of step into villain mode or I'm going to try to save the world and elevate other people and become a breathwork coach. And then eventually you go, I'm not successful. And now I'm a victim again. And you just keep cycling through that shitty wheel.
Right.
Until at some point you get to that initiation, advocacy, that moment where you realize, oh, it's not my dad. It's not the government. It's not society. It's me.
Right.
That's the moment when the hero goes into the cave where his dragon lives and goes, oh, you're wearing my face. Underneath Darth Vader's helmet in the cave is Luke Skywalker. That's the moment of initiation.
That's great.
And the realization that all of the illegitimate suffering, it's a Buddhist term, which means it's all the negative adversity that is in our life that we're generating. That's called illegitimate suffering versus legitimate suffering, which is, it's hard to get up in the morning. It's hard to go to the gym. We're all going to get old and our, knees hurt, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But illegitimate suffering is all the stupid shit that we are creating in our life because we're watching, doing, ingesting things that make us feel worse afterwards. like
Sure.
short-term gratification, which is adolescent. It's the classic definition of clinical adolescence is I cannot defer gratification because I want it now. I need external validation to feel like I'm enough. And that's the adolescent operating system, which then is replaced by the advocacy of not only am I responsible for all of the good and the bad in the world that I'm creating, but I have the ability and in fact the duty, the responsibility to change that. And
Right.
it's a heavy burden. Initiation is not like a sexy term of, oh, I did a men's retreat and I'm an initiated man. No, it means you put on the backpack of your people. You put on the backpack of your family and your community and your life and the entire load of the mature man. Ooh, and there's a lot of men who have had that backpack placed on them too early and too abruptly, and it breaks them. And so they revert back to, well, I deserve to play video games. If you're an initiated man, you do not. You do not deserve to play video games because that time should be spent in the service of something greater than yourself. And
Right.
so we're run by an entire society of adolescent men in mature bodies, which is why you can see this blast radius of clinical anxiety and depression and addiction, and it's very unfulfilling ultimately. And so the ultimate outcome of an unfulfilling or meaningless life is suicide, and that's just spiking across the entire male community right now.
Yeah, it's something actually. I'm speaking with a PhD researcher who specifically looks at male suicide next week, and I like the nuance in a lot that you've said, because the idea of therapy is to uncover the ideas of how you feel and why you feel and how you operate, and kind of
Mm-hmm.
to finally learn what your origin story is, because up until the time you're 8 or 16 or whatever, I don't think we really fully understand what we've went through in our life. We don't have the knowledge, we don't have the awareness. And so, but there is that stopping point where you're like, okay, I get that my parents did this was done, this was perpetrated by bullies at school, like all of these things happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but I think if we, to your point, if we always look at our lives like we always have a boot on our neck, it's easy to just lay down and say, well, I can't do anything. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
victim to all of these things, even though they happened however many years ago. And I think that's the hardest part, that like putting on that backpack and being like, but this is my life now. And what
Mm-hmm.
I do from here on out, I can change things. I can look at things differently. I can decide to relate to my parents better, or I can decide to never speak to them again, depending what the actions happened in the past were.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I suppose my question is, when is it? Because you're like, I'm the modern man, or not the modern man, the initiated man. When they step into that new era of manhood and responsibility, to do something greater than themselves, when do they take time to actually accept that, like, maybe raising a bunch of kids that maybe one is sick, and like, when can they accept their own suffering to realize that they need some sort of healing so they can continue that journey? Because I think a lot
Mm-hmm.
of this, at least the research on men with addiction and suffering and suicide, it doesn't seem like it's just because they're not living unfulfilling lives, which is clearly part of it, but also that men have been taught not to feel any of the things that are hurting them. So they don't know when they're in a bad situation, a bad relationship, something that's really taxing them. And so
Mm-hmm.
their only outlet to feel anything is gambling, drugs, porn, alcohol, and then eventually, sadly,
Mm-hmm.
suicide. So how do we get to a point to do all these things to move into that adult male agency that you're alluding to, but also men can accept what their own needs are?
Well, it is a false paradigm of our modern culture that men can't cry, and it drives me crazy, though, all this polarity talk around it, your inner feminine. And
Fuck.
it's like,
It drives me nuts.
what, what would you take from men and call feminine? Compassion, self-care, empathy, emotions. That's not feminine.
Yeah.
And how dare you try to pull that from men?
Yes.
It's simply not true.
I love your anger behind that, because I feel the same thing, and it's good to be able to express it with someone, because there's such a sadness in me through all the research I've been doing for the book. I was talking about that, like, we take this from boys at such a young age that it should make everybody angry.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I've studied mythology, history, indigenous cultures all around the world. There is always emotional discharge. There's always emotional either reintegration back into the tribe and humanity and being and sensitivity and vulnerability. It's included everywhere. That when the Spartans would go to war, they would call they ran farms. They were dads. They were they weren't just dudes with the little Speedos and the cloaks that just fought all day. Right. And so when they called the Spartans up to go to war, there's a little ritual before war where they would write their name on a stick, and then they would break the stick in half, and it was a metaphor or a ritual of death. Like, hey, we all gathered, there's our enemy, and I just died. And then I tie half the stick to my shield, and half the stick goes in the basket behind our lines. And then at that point, hoka hey, today's a good day to die. Which means I don't have to be afraid and piss myself of what will happen to me or what I'm going to do, because it doesn't matter. I'm already dead. And so it's pretty easy to kick ass from that mindset. And that is the full claiming of the martial warrior aspect of masculinity. And it's valuable. It's why we're here on the planet, is that we had men who are willing to break the stick and go stab a bison for the tribe. And to stand at the mouth of the cave and tell the saber-toothed cat, you're not coming in. That's also a birthright of men, is to be able to armor up and do the things that other people are not willing or capable of doing. But at the end of the battle, they would put the sticks back together. And it was a way of not only tallying their losses, but it was a reintegration ritual. And at that point, the Spartans would shudder, and they would wail, and they would weep, because they were reborn and they got to go home. They were resurrected. And so there was weeping and wailing. And there's weeping and wailing at the end of every, battle or traumatic event, which is why the knights, would take their armor off at the church, and they would be given a robe, and they would write love letters and go on pilgrimages, and the samurai would take their armor off and do calligraphy and pottery and flower arranging. So there is just battle-tested reintegration rituals throughout history of men reclaiming their vulnerability, their emotions, their sensitivity, their empathy. So it is a legacy of men to do the hard things and also return home. And we're not taught any of that.
No, and it's just really refreshing for me to hear, because most people that you hear online or wherever that are talking about let men be men, men should be like this, men should be like that, I think these are people looking to exploit the idea of what they think a traditional man could be. Whereas I think as humans, our biggest trait, which has made us the most apex predator on the planet, I think, is our adaptability. It's why we survive in cold cultures, warm cultures, rain, snow, all over the place. But for some reason, we seem to just let go of the idea that emotional adaptability is also part of it. Men and women can be in these sort of battle scenarios, under attack, protecting their children, etc. But then they also have the right to mourn. And if men don't go through that, like you said, I think reinitiation, and coming out of that, well, then you don't need, I guess we all know from you know way better than I would, working with veterans, like men that come home after being under fire and that stress for so long, you don't need a wartime tense mentality when you're at home with your children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you armor up, you can't feel your children.
Right.
You can't feel yourself. You can't even enjoy a sunset through the slit of your visor. So, you're an armored thing, and we require our men to do armored things.
Sure.
Whether it's business or war or hunting or whatever that heavy adversity experience is, but we do have to take the armor off at some point, and the adaptability topic amongst our species, which is the ability to be versatile. That's driven by diversity of personality, diversity of the roles in the tribe. And so you don't have to be the guy who literally puts on armor to serve as a man. There are also, and which is a warrior class. And 25% of the world is psychologically a warrior class man, and they want to compete, and they want results, and they want to serve. Like there's all these bigger dynamics, but there's also 25% of the world that are the opposite. They're healers. They're resiliency men. So they have a function within the tribe, which is still innately masculine, and those are the therapists, and they're the wounded healer or the servant leader, or we have different titles for this role.
Right.
And then we also have our magicians, our wise men, our shamans, and they have a very different battle that they're undertaking for the sake of the tribe, which is to provide wisdom and plan and understanding and mastery and efficiency. And that's a very different role. So there are roles within every tribal structure, and we are a tribal structure. So whatever hierarchy you choose to join, there is a journey up that hierarchy to provide greater service to your tribe. And that hierarchy is not based on power, it's based on competence. So if you're a healer shaman person, be the very best one you can be. But all of those things deal with messy, uncomfortable, emotionally traumatizing experiences.
Okay.
And so resiliency runs through all of it. It's just a different form of resiliency.
Well, because this is another thought I've been really having, is that there's been so many studies now since the 70s. I spoke with the psychologist from the APA who founded the Man and Masculinities Department, and what he's saying is that anytime you study men, the ones that are more likely to believe in this idea of traditional masculinity, they are more prone to violence. They're more prone to self-harm. They have worse mental health outcomes. Oh, sorry. Someone just calling. They have worse mental health outcomes. And so the concept that we are trying to put all of the men on the planet into the warrior class, I think is exactly what is causing the problem. And because there are so many different types of men, like gay men are men that want to, like you said, be healers, be resilience people. Like there are so many. How about
artists?
Artists.
Yeah.
On top of this, and I think we could also have the warrior class that comes back from war, and when there is no battle to be fought, is the best pottery instructor or teacher in the village. And I think the detriment we're doing to boys is to tell them they have to be one specific thing, instead of, like you said, being like all men are a tribe, and the healers will help the warriors when they come back. The warriors will protect the healers. And these are the things that I think we lose as a tribe, and it just makes everyone a fake warrior, pretending that they're bigger warriors, and it makes us fight amongst ourselves and not accept ourselves. And so the one thing is I wonder is how do you in the work you've done with men in Wolf Tribe and so on, how do you try to foster this sense of belonging and I guess personality differences between men so that we're all one?
Well, we're one in the context that we all belong to each other if we're in a aligned or affiliation culture,
Okay.
and that's called an honor-based culture. And the challenge with honor-based cultures, which is the military, police, fire, sports, um, fraternities, martial arts academies, some very rare, high-performing corporate cultures, those are honor cultures, and basically those are the most resilient, the most competitive, the most adaptable. Like that's tribal culture. That's really it's our original operating system, and we've lost that because there's a top end to it in terms of numbers. We can only maintain that deep kinship system, which is reciprocal,
Hmm.
and that's a key thing. Um, if I'm willing to go to war, or I'm willing to spend my time healing with you and take on all of your trauma, which is compassion, which means I'm willing to suffer with you. Compassion is to suffer with. So our healers are taking on trauma too.
Yeah.
Like you don't get to do suicide prevention, for a weekend and not come back with a load of debris. So whatever role you play in the tribe, you're taking on some debris and suffering from that.
Hmm.
So uh, the reciprocity of an honor culture means, yeah, I'm going to be willing to perform my duty, which is not free for me, and I'm going to get that returned to me because of the reciprocity of the tribe. That tops out at 150 individuals. So we can't maintain that sense of intimacy and reciprocity and collaboration and that honor dynamic when we get in larger organizations. And as soon as you get into a city or a large community or a big company, all of a sudden honor is degraded into pride,
Or social
which is
media.
social media is also, yeah, that's a pride culture. And it's a feeding frenzy of lone wolves trying to scavenge from each other to survive. Whereas we're supposed to be in an intact pack
Yeah.
hunting game together in which we all thrive, but that can only function at a certain numeric number. So as a species, we have transitioned into a pride planet, and so the reclaiming of our honor cultures within a smaller organization, meet your neighbors. Most people in Los Angeles here do not know their neighbors, which is bizarre. If you said it to any other culture and any other era, like, what's that guy's name who lives right next to you? I think it's Jim, maybe.
Wow.
I think he's in finance. I don't really know. It's like, how do you live? Like, what is that about? I mean, and then kind of to segue that into the resiliency conversation, the biggest fear that humans carry is a fear of other humans. That's why cortisol rates shoot up in elevators. It's deeply unsettling to be in close proximity to a member of humanity that is not part of your tribe, because you're correct. We're an apex predator. So you are standing, living, driving, working next to somebody who is an apex predator that you don't have alignment with and isn't there to protect you. And so we're living with that constantly. And that's a gigantic source of um, chronic stress and cortisol, norepinephrine, and adrenaline, all these stress hormones, which are crippling our immune system, uh, leading to all of that clinical anxiety and addiction. It's an incredibly toxic expression of this experiment of let's live in giant cities. It's like it's not working out well. And you can see a movement of people going, wow, this weird homeschooling, homesteading thing, well, that's starting to look kind of good to me. It's like, yeah, because it's fucking healthy. We're
Well,
supposed to know our neighbors.
it's really interesting because I think sometimes the city matters, and I think the culture within around that city matters as well. I think if you're in some large cities where everything is based on work, and to speak to your point that to live a fulfilling life will make all of us feel more fulfilled and better. But if you're working as a lawyer in a corporate law firm, you can't really see the people you're helping, you're filing papers. Like there's a bit of soullessness to that that is surely even more disconnecting. Whereas if I can only use my experience from like living in Barcelona, for example, that like this, I tell people the reason I live here, it's the only city I've been to that feels like it gives back to me for living here. Right? Like there's maybe 2.5 million people. Like it's not in New York or I don't know how big LA is, but there's like a relatability to the, like it's not high rises there. You see everybody, people biking around. There's more, I think, connection to each other in the city than the soullessness than a lot of, I would say, even Toronto and New York in some respects. But go ahead.
The understructure of this sense of community you're talking about is built on kind of three big components. It's a shared vision for the future that does not exist. It's a shared set of cultural values that drive decision making, and then the understanding of that all of our missions are shared in some way that is reciprocal, and communities that are able to hold that shared foundation of alignment are healthy. And America is was the most ambitious attempt to hold together a vast amount of people within an honor-based culture. And like we were the first ones to roll that out and go, all right, we have a constitution which, provides all of us with these unalienable rights, which addresses that. That's the American dream. That's our vision. We have these core values. That's our constitution. We have this, shared missions, our economy, and our the way that the states collaborate and share boundaries, and it did work for a good period of time, and it's now being eroded. We no longer share that affiliation with each other, and so you can see the collapse of the culture of the United States into kind of ideological driven tribalism, which contains the root of what's called exclusive virtue, which this is my tribe and all other tribes are wrong and bad and barely human.
Right.
And that's the dark side of honor or tribe. It is exclusive in some ways, and
Right.
so
Yeah, I went through kind of the cycle on my view of America. Like growing up, I didn't leave Canada until I was about 30, and so it used to be growing up. I'm such a pulp culture sponge for movies and TVs and music and all these things, and so it was always like America's so great, and then you grow up and you're like America's so bad, and then you become an adult and you're like America's so complicated, and that like it's not good or bad. And I think, like you said, there's these dishonorable tribes, like I guess on the polar sides, where driving a lot of this culture where it still seems like most Americans, the vast majority of Americans, may have some difference of opinion, but they're all just good people wanting to live their lives, and both are getting caught in culture wars, and it's so sad to watch. I know, like I think resilience training is a good underbelly for talking about America, because I think we'll see hopefully in the next how many years, 5, 10, 20 years, how much resiliency America has built into it. And, I watch with, hope. I still try to have some of that America hope. But to go back to something you said, I'd like to ask you a question about your work with veterans and coming back from war and being under that sort of mindset, because A while ago, I spoke with like the world's expert on crying and negative emotions. This professor from the Netherlands, and something he said really stuck with me. That like sadness is the companion of love. That you can't have sadness unless you have love, and vice versa. And the inconvenient part for us is that we can't choose to turn down one of this emotion or turn up another. We can't say, you know what, sadness is inconvenient. I want more love. It doesn't work like that. And unfortunately, it seems like we take both from boys by telling them that if they emote or in any direction, that they're a girl, that they're feminine, and even well-intentioned fathers are scared of their boys. Maybe they'll be gay, or they'll be too much like a girl and they won't survive. And so men grow up and they really don't have this ability to know what they're feeling, which is, I think someone coined it, called alexithymia. And it really hurts men to understand how they feel and how they can interact well in the world, and it's hard to love and to accept love. So my question, all that being said, is when you have to work with these veterans that have come back from these environments, how do you help them have the reinitiation to be able to love and accept love again, to understand that the whole world is not that experience that they had during whatever war they came from?
Ooh, that's a kettle of fish right there.
Right.
So in the book Iron John by Robert Bly, which sits at the very center of mythopoetics, or men's work, highly recommend that book for all the men watching and all the women who love them. And it's basically an initiation myth from Central Europe.
Okay.
And there's a point in the story where the hero suffers his wounds and his trauma, and then he has to go spend some time raking out the castle ovens, and it's called Ashes, and it's in the hero's journey. It's the abyss, or the ordeal, and Bly calls that the ability to grieve, and grief is the process that connects sadness back into love, is the ability to grieve. And
Whoa.
and so the ability to grieve is something that is included in every indigenous culture that has intact warrior reintegration rituals. You have to grieve. And grief takes time, and grief is messy, and grief is not sexy. And there's a loss of capacity and efficacy when you're grieving, but that is the time where we discharge and we purify, and we go through that process of, again, that's the taking off of the armor at the church. And that grief process is not something that we can do alone. We can self-absolve guilt, which is important. We cannot self-absolve shame, because shame is connected to other people and our role in the tribe and how we believe people are perceiving us. So if we have potentially either seen, done, or had things done to us that are shameful, then we need the absolution of the tribe.
Wow.
And that's the function of reintegrating warriors back from challenging events, is the tribe welcomes them back, and we all go in the sweat lodge, or we have the parades, and then when the veterans come home, and we give them a period of time where, yeah, he's working through his shit. Like that grief process, which is the return to love, needs to be held by the civilian world, and that's not happening now. You'll notice what everyone says in the airport to veterans. What do they say?
Thanks for your service.
Yeah, it's a dismissal. It means I paid you. I gave you. You got to go to college now. So thank you for doing what I don't want to know what you did. I don't want to.
Oh man.
I don't want to hear about your story. I don't want to know if you actually killed a kid. So thank you for your service. Whereas what really the warriors need is welcome home. Welcome home.
I got chills just thinking of that, and how different that is. It's like you
Yeah.
did something for me, okay, but you're not part of me. You did something for me. You can go away.
Transactional.
Right, you can go away now. But instead of
Yeah.
like, thank you, welcome home, or like that, I think welcome home and thank you are kind of the same idea, but so different in perspective.
Yeah. And so we we did a great job with that through most of our historical wars in the United States. Is that there was a grieving time. Uh, uh, it's a it's the third place in warrior reintegration or resiliency. That okay, you go do the hard thing, and then before you come home, there's this grief time. And in most most like masculine worlds, you do something before you go home. You go to the bar. Hey, after work, I'm going to go to the pub, have some drinks with my mates, and then I'm going to go home. And then I'm capable of being a father and a husband and a human. I'm now being. But when I go to work, it's wartime. I'm making money. I'm doing hard things. I'm hiring and firing and selling, taking on trauma. But that missing third place uh, is really an ancient indigenous function. And after World War II, the the soldiers, had a month-long boat ride with their brothers, and they got to grieve. They got to tell their stories.
Huh.
They got to discharge. They got to have safety and camaraderie. And then when they got home, there was the yellow ribbon parade. Wow, okay, I'm back. And
Right.
and so we saw radically less suicides and what they classically call post-traumatic stress disorder. And that D at the end of PTS is, I believe, a profound disservice to the mental and emotional state of traumatized people. It's not a disorder. It's a adaptation to a very uh, adverse situation that
Right.
people do have to become to survive. You become hypervigilant. You don't sleep a lot. You don't trust people who are outside of your immediate tribe.
Right.
Like, that's a survival protocol. It's not a disorder. Now,
I
it
love that.
becomes a disorder when that behavior set of norms is no longer useful or healthy or valuable, and back in the civilian world. And so um, that's an important distinction, because the moment you put on disorder, and a lot of vets are guilty of this, is you have adopted the victim mindset. I'm a victim. I have a disorder. It's
Right.
like, no, nope. If you have issues drinking, with alcohol coping, porn coping, I would encourage you to not say that you're an alcoholic and you're not an addict. You are a person who may be currently addicted, but you're not an addict. It's an identity that people take on that stops the adaptability that you referred to.
Oh, I love that. Cause I've had this conversation with a very good friend of mine here, and he's an American. When he came over in his early 20s, he had been, I think, a couple years sober, because his teens and very early 20s he was drinking, doing all sorts of drugs, and sometimes he still says, and he's in his early 40s now. He's got two kids, a wife, hasn't had a drink or whatever in 20 odd years, and says sometimes, oh, because I'm an alcoholic. And we've had a couple of these like well-meaning conversations where I kind of said what you said, that like, I think that does you a disservice, because I know you to be this like upstanding, talented, great guy who takes care of his kids, who loves his wife, who does great at work. And I don't see any trace of this addict that you continually tell me that you are. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it hinders what you see as possibility for yourself. And
Yeah.
he says it helps him to think, and I totally respect that. But I told him, once a year, if this comes up, I want just to remind you that I don't think that you are this thing. We've had some really good chats like that, and so
Yeah.
it's really interesting that you brought that up, because I agree.
It in the men's movement, there's a tremendous focus placed on healing, 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 healing. That's not the goal of men's work.
Hmm.
The goal of men's work is to heal in order to serve. And again, we become identified as somebody who needs to heal. And so you're in therapy forever because
Yes.
you are somebody who needs to heal. And that becomes your identity and your worldview and your personality. And that's an intermediary step to something that is far more significant, which is to be vital and to serve and to lead and to abundance and like all the other stuff. So
Hmm.
the identification with something that is self-limiting is something we should be very vigilant about tracking.
I love that because I think when you stay in this victim mindset, I think you could have the same therapist for two different people, and two different clients will drive those conversations in different ways. Where if someone wants to stay in this mindset of I was a victim of a past spouse or friend or all of these things, then you're not moving anywhere. You're just staying in the shit all the time about this. But if it's you're approaching therapy in the idea of like, okay, I'm on my way to healing, but also I'm doing these things with my life to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
How can you help me get these blocks out of the way? I think those are like two very different
Mm-hmm.
people, and I like the direction of that. And so I guess when it comes to resiliency, can you explain what the difference, if there is one, between emotional and mental resilience, if there is a difference?
Mm. Well, emotions come first. We're emotional beings, and so our emotions happen, you know, under the hood before we have thoughts. So the emotions are the generators of thoughts,
Okay.
and so that's an important kind of dynamic to realize that, um, and we are all emotion, sensation, and thought creating machines. That's what we're designed to do. So we're constantly generating those three things, which make up our reality. The ability to be a conscious generator of, hey, I'm choosing how to interpret and to experience my thoughts, emotions, and sensations. That gives you the efficacy or the advocacy to be able to um, serve. And so that ability to not be run by any of those three things is the initiation process. It's like, hey, as a initiated man, I can recognize that um, I'm I'm feeling sadness, or my body hurts, or I have obsessive thoughts about something, but those are not rulers of my reality. I get to choose how I experience or interpret that.
Okay.
And so that's a psychological conversation, but it's at the very root of um, consciousness. It's the function of meditation, and meditation was given to the warrior class. Meditation was given to men on the battlefield by the god Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. You know, the Krishna, the god, gave the hero of that story, Arjuna, um, a protocol to defeat all his enemies and be absolved of all guilt. And that protocol was meditation.
Hmm.
And so the act of meditation is to raise your consciousness above, well, I'm feeling this way, so I have to do it. Or I thought these things, so I have to say them. Or I'm feeling, you know, a sensation, so I have to react to it. Like, no, you don't.
Hmm.
You are a sovereign creature that is having these experiences that are not you. They do not have to dictate the way that you speak and act and consume and live. So meditation is kind of the dojo of raising consciousness or sovereignty, and it's connected to initiation. That ability to um, be a sovereign man, as opposed to one who's ruled by emotions or thoughts. That's a very different animal. It's self control. That is it's a development of maturity, and it
Right.
can be taught. It's a taught function.
Well, it sounds like that brings us back to that hard idea where you said like to not be controlled by your emotions, and I think unfortunately, a lot of men seem to interpret that is that we shouldn't have them or that we should ignore them, and so how do you? Because it sounds like what you're saying is that it's hard to have mental resiliency without emotional resiliency because you have to master that one. So how do you not let your how would you teach some of your students, I guess, your clients, how do I phrase this, to have emotional adaptability and resiliency, but not dismiss the fact that you have emotion? Like, how do you control them by also accepting them if they're so overwhelming, etc.?
Yeah. So you have to name them. Like
Okay.
you are not them. So the act of naming something is the act of owning it, right? And
Accepting
so
it.
so a lot of the process of this is, write things down. That's a very very proven therapeutic model of dealing with your thoughts. Write it down, and then it's not this sort of vague um, force that is behind you and uh, possessing you. You write it down, and now it's like, oh, I own that. And the same thing with emotions. Um, the act of speaking is to own it. And so it means, oh, I'm in charge now of, I can see this thing in front of me instead of behind me. So writing and speaking, are indispensable with resiliency. They're all therapeutic models. That's why we go to therapy, is that we get to speak the words, and, abracadabra. I create what I speak. It's an old Hebrew word. And so when we say things, now we get to own it. We get to crystallize this sort of vague water that I'm swimming in into something that is manageable. So writing and speaking are really important for that ownership.
I've definitely found that every time I just find too many ideas or worries or whatever that are just swirling in my mind, I can't make sense or head or tails of them. But if I
Mm-hmm.
just want to write free form for 3 or 4 pages, I
Mm-hmm.
tend to see what things are coming out, or if I'm on a walk with a friend and I can just monologue for a bit about something I'm thinking, something comes out of that, and it's
Yeah,
almost like magic, and you're like,
it
oh,
is
I
magic.
didn't even think about why I said that. Oh, okay, and then you can actually accept it and deal with it. But if it's just in the Wizard of Oz tornado in your head, the house just keeps going round and around and never
Yeah.
lands.
The the act of writing is spelling. It's also magical,
Okay.
right? It is, and that's in every culture, every spiritual system. God creates the world with His words. So you write them, that's spelling, or you speak them, abracadabra. There's magic in both. It's alchemic.
I really, really, I believe in the magic of words. So yeah, I know you have a believer on that. I guess when you're working with clients, and you can choose what type of client it would be, either if it's a veteran or high performers, etc. What things do you really focus on, and maybe you can give us some exercises to do that maybe could help people with resiliency in their lives.
You have to understand how the system works, the engine that we are brought into the world with, and that's your sympathetic nervous system or parasympathetic nervous system. And so educating people roughly on how the operating system that you're given functions is incredibly valuable. And just in a nutshell, we have our little smoke alarm threat sensor called our amygdala, and its only job is to scan for threats. It never sleeps.
Right.
And so it's not necessarily a physical threat of I'm going to get beat up or I'm going to get eaten. It's anything that is a perceived threat to our physical or emotional well-being. Uh, I'm not safe in my relationship. I'm not. I have a lack of prestige in my community. Those are all deep threats to our connection and our safety and our belonging. So anything that is a perceived threat triggers our amygdala, and our amygdala then very, brilliant design feature, um, releases stress hormones into our nervous system and then our body, which is cortisol and adrenaline, and what that does is it turns off all of our non-essential functions. So our digestion stops, our libido stops, our immune system stops, our prefrontal cortex goes offline. So we're no longer thinking critically. We're no longer rational, empathetic, compassionate. And because we don't need these to deal with getting eaten. So they all go offline. And then all of our energies go into, fight, flight, freeze, appease. And when we're in that, triggered or activated or non-resilient space, we're making non-rational decisions. They're not empathetic decisions. They're not compassionate decisions. Our immune system's going to shit. Like everything is put on hold to deal with this short-term moment of survival. It's a brilliant adaptation for acute stress. And that's what we're built to survive in. We are not built to survive chronic stress. So every time you are interacting with a stranger, you are having that same thing happen throughout your whole body. So how often are you around strangers? All day.
Yeah.
And so we're no longer in these just short periods of fight or flight survival mode. We're in chronic stress. Our immune systems are constantly compromised. We're oftentimes not thinking rationally. We're oftentimes not compassionate because that's our regulated state. So understanding the symptoms of when you are triggered or activated or out of regulation is the first step, because we don't know when we're offline. We simply don't. We just think, oh, I'm grumpy, or I'm impatient, or we catch ourselves, flipping somebody off in traffic. It's like, whoa, where would you ever flip somebody off in the real world?
Right.
Like that's a precursor to a fist fight, and yet we do it all the time in traffic, honking and yelling and flipping, so.
Well, not to mention how people act on the internet. I mean, like if
Oh,
you're
yeah,
living
constantly.
most of your life online, it doesn't matter if you're a man, a woman, whoever. You're on TikTok or especially like Twitter and Instagram, like you're just your worst self. Like because it's all you just keep scrolling until like you just have this emotional variability like this that I'm happy, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm jealous. I'm like the brain is not used to going through all these different emotions. If you were like you said in your tribe, sitting around with 100 people and you know everybody, there's like a good enough amount of cohesion that you're either getting along and collaborating or you're angry about something or like, but you're not doing all of this in the matter of 15 minutes while you're scrolling on your couch over here.
And it's resolved. And
Right.
this is the important one within that tribe or team or community, an intact community, is that you realize that you are all part of something, and that's the word Ubuntu in this old African word. I am because we are, and we are because I am. It is humanity, and that's belonging or tribe or honor, kinship. When we're in those cultures, there is a collaborative and reciprocally driven sense of safety, which means if I do something that's really bad to you, I undermine you, I gossip, I politic, then that's coming back to me. And it's coming back to me in the form of accountability. But
Right.
it's also, I just degraded a member of my tribe, which means I degraded myself. And on a competitive sports team, you would never do that on the field because, oh, I don't like that guy. I trip him. Like I just lost by
Right.
undermining a member of my tribe. So that trust and safety within a kinship system or a belonging culture, honor culture, it drives healthy conflict. If I know that I'm safe and I know that we share this affiliation, we're working on something that's collaborative, I can give you feedback about, hey, you said you were going to do this, and I see you now, behind the building smoking, and you said you were not going to be. It's no longer shame; it's accountability. Or if there has been some infringement of behavior, like I have the safety to be able to engage with you, and things are resolved quickly within those contexts. Within sports teams and military units, things are resolved, whereas we don't resolve them on social media. There's no accountability.
No, zero.
And so you have the freedom to say and do whatever you want. And so just to close the resiliency kind of best practices, understand how your nervous system works. Mm-hmm. Understand the markers of when you're triggered. And everybody has a pretty understandable set of what we call trauma signs. If you're addicted, if you're depressed, you have a lack of belonging. If you're passive aggressive, if you're gossiping and undermining, you have a lack of control. If you're dealing with sadistic, masochistic, martyrdom, punishment, bullying, there's a lack of getting results in your life. And if you are tyrannical or a weakling, there's this lack of vision in your life. Those 4 buckets are the big roles that exist within all of us. And those are the trauma signs when people are dysregulated. So when somebody's expressing that, they don't know they're offline. They don't know if they're in an activated state. They're simply being that. Oh, I'm addicted. I'm an addict. Like, no, you have a lack of belonging and you're offline. You're not in a regulated place. So that same engine that puts us offline, we have the ability to put it back online. And that's the very heart of resiliency, right? Is how you get yourself back online.
And how would you do that with some clients? Like you can can choose whichever clients you'd like, but what is your, I guess, go-to process that helps people come back online to be within themselves?
Yeah, there's a tremendously battle-tested list of resiliency practices. One of them, when you're offline, your breath is short and shallow because you're oxygen loading, you're preparing for something. So slow, regular breaths will put you back online because you are now telling your body that you're in a relaxed, safe place. Your body goes, oh, so we don't need all this cortisol? Let's dump some serotonin into the mix. Right. And so this is box breaths. No. Which is box breath is inhale 4, which is much slower than we normally do. Hold for 4. Exhale 4. Hold for 4. Inhale 4. A couple sets of those box breaths of 4, 4, 4, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, things aren't so bad because you're back online. You just took over the sovereignty of your nervous system. Okay. And
it's really interesting. I have a friend here who's starting to work with continuous glucose monitoring systems. He doesn't have diabetes. He's just doing it for health research, potentially start a new business. And he finally convinced me that I'm going to wear one for a month, probably next month. And because he says you'll be so surprised with how much of your emotional state is really just driven by your nutrition. And if you have too little glucose in your system, if you have too much, if you're hungry, and all these things, he goes, this is the thing he learned the most because he's an endurance athlete, so he's just trying to learn more about his body. He goes, but the biggest surprise was that sometimes when I just feel terrible, and I feel depressed, I get and argue with my girlfriend, whatever. He goes, my phone goes off almost immediately after I have this sensation of feeling shitty. And I realized my blood glucose is through the floor, and so it's called
hangry,
right? Yeah, but the idea is that like
Yeah.
we go into these different states, and it's really interesting that you could help breathe your way to a better frame of mind, so you can at least troubleshoot
Or eat
some of the
your
things.
way.
Or
Eat your way to a better.
Get a protein bar into you. You're right.
Yeah. Um, Getting outside. Just get outside. Nature, sunlight, touch an animal, touch another human being. The moment we have physical contact with a large mammal, our body releases serotonin. Serotonin is what counters cortisol. So physical contact. That's why we give hugs to people who are sad. It's like, hey, let me give you a little serotonin, and that physical contact is a regulation protocol.
Could this be an idea of why? I'm really speaking out of turn. There's no studies really, but it seems like emotional resilience. There is a lot in the female community because they have so much support, and men seem to, if they're subscribing to this idea of traditional masculinity, they tend to isolate because they think they're like Atlas and they should take on all of the world's problems and not have any support. So, like, do you do any of that with the veterans you work with? Just like give them a hug and tell them they're welcome and kind of get them into nature? Like, is that part of the, because I can't imagine coming back to war, what that experience is like. Is that like part of the protocol to get these men back into, I guess, their body and society?
Yeah. And the bigger overarching one is that sense of belonging.
Right.
So all the psychoeducation, the resiliency practices, those are all really important skills and tools in the arsenal of resiliency. But belonging is the big one. It trumps all of it. When people feel like they belong, then they're safe.
Yeah.
That's the very root of it.
This is something I really want to work on and try to create for men in the ideas, and what I'm trying to put together is that for some reason, like, women really have, they go to the bathroom and they go to a yoga class and they've made 2 or 3 new friends. And it's really built into how they create community. And I think in the last couple hundred years, we've really, I think, stolen that from boys and men. And there was even a study recently that said by a psychologist that said, men need at least 2 nights with their friends per week to keep their mental health going. And the comments on Instagram and social media were just savage by these women and men saying, like, "Oh, these are boys. These aren't men. And really, like, shaming these people for men who maybe just want to hang out with some of their buddies and feel like they belong. And so, like, it's such a sad thing. And how would you recommend maybe some men that are listening that might feel more disconnected and they want to reach out and have more friends? Like, what, I guess, how would you recommend that they go ahead and do that even if they're scared to?
Couple thoughts on that. One of my mentors, Dr. Stephen Johnson, he founded the LA Men's Center, which is one of the old school big men's centers. And he says, if you remove alcohol, sports, and work, men have no friends.
Right. And that's terrible. That's terrible. That's like, thankfully, where I am, it's part of the reason why I stay here. Like, there are a lot more open-hearted, heart-centered men here. Yeah. And I've thankfully have a lot at home, in Canada, like that as well. But it's, like you said, home, work, and what's the other one? Sports?
Yeah. That's the only conduit that men have for a sense of belonging.
Yeah. Or a lot of men think that to hang out with their friends, they have to participate in risky behavior, insult each other, or drink together only. And a lot of men, I've even heard friends of mine saying that they've avoided seeing their friends because they just don't want to drink and live that unhealthy lifestyle anymore. But they only understand that a ticket to the friendship game means having to drink and do all these things. And no one, unfortunately, is just saying, can't we just go for dinner? Like, it's such a weird thing.
Well, this will be contentious, and I'm okay if we disagree on this one.
Sure.
This is kind of, and I'll own that this may be archetype related. And the archetypes are those 4 masculine roles that exist in all of us. The book King, Warrior, Magician, Lover
I've seen
is
that
a
one.
must read for all men. Uh, I think to maintain your man card, you got to read that book. So read that book. It's by Dr. Moore and Dr. Gillette, University of Chicago, and then Iron John. Those will radically level up your initiation, man understanding, and efficacy. So, um, and obviously my archetypes. I have a strong king, strong warrior. I've learned how to be good in the others, but so I'm willing for this to be contentious. Um, I believe that men are built to do. I think that we all desire significance in our life. We all have a need to serve something greater than ourselves. Like I believe that is kind of the core of my ethos or my worldview is that um, if you're not for others, then what are you? So with that said, and you can disagree with me, um, I think that men need to share something for them to have sustainable friendships. You need to be working on something. You need to be on a shared journey together. I think just meeting for the sake of meeting, in my experience of running men's work for 30 years, if there's not a project, if there's not a challenge, if there's not something that is collaborative and reciprocal, then men will not do it. They
Right.
will not maintain those relationships unless you're working on something that is shared. And so, for the men who are in the lone wolf phase of their life and scavenging and unhappy and unregulated and looking to join a pack, like, okay, where do I join my pack? Um, Find out the pack that is doing the things that you want to be doing. And I'm stressing that word intentionally, doing. So, you know, if it's a sport, like if you want to get into jujitsu, well, sample 5 jujitsu schools that are close to you, and you'll find one that has a culture that is a match for you, and that you feel like uh, safe and connected and aligned. But it's not. Hey, I'm just hanging out. My gut tells me that's adolescent.
Right.
I think
Well,
mature masculine men are doing something, whether it's a project, or you're starting a nonprofit, or you're getting in shape together, or you're planning a trip, or you're learning how to do jujitsu. Like, you need to be doing something.
right. Well, I think that's definitely better than staying isolated. And I certainly disagree, but very respectfully, because I think there are men that I think unfortunately stay on their own, and that's not the way to do any of that. I think that's the way to stay sad, stay angry, stay resentful, stay victimhood mentality. So I think, yeah, doing something, finding something that you like, and doing something. I don't think it has to be ultra productive, but if you're doing something in the world that obviously, if it helps someone or if it's a group, or yeah, I think that's definitely the way to go ahead and meet people. Where I think we may differ is, at least personally, all of my best closest friends, and I'm very fortunate to have many throughout the world. None of them are on a shared thing, and it's just them accepting me and me accepting them. And I think that is what's kept us so close through decades now.
Mm.
And what a lot of people have said, at least in some of the research I've been doing, is that the unfortunate part with men that will join things that are just to be productive, either it's a entrepreneur group or it's a jiu-jitsu group, that once these things end, like let's say someone gets injured or someone's business goes down, those friendships also fall apart. And it's what
Mm-hmm.
leaves men to
Yeah.
feeling quite disconnected, because if we're not connected just on like, I accept you, and I like having you in my life, and then all of these friendships become a little bit fragile in their ability to stay connected. I,
Yeah. And that's why I preface it by saying my archetype requires shared missions, which is a very foundational thing for
Right.
any culture. The other side of the archetype map is the lover, the magician. They're able to connect and meet simply for the sake of the connection and meeting. And that would be kind of your philosophy around friendships. It's a safe place where we get to celebrate our connection.
Right.
And so there are men who can make and maintain those relationships. And, on the assertiveness scale for, those of us who are, trying to change the world, that's the fabric that holds those communities together.
Right.
So with the veterans who are coming out, they had a shared mission, and they had a shared set of values, and they had a shared vision for the world, and it was provided to them. And then the transition back into the civilian world where none of those are provided. They have to find they have to create or join a community where some of those drivers are being met. Right. And that's the big challenge for veterans, is that they had all of that, and now they have to create all of that. And that's a daunting lift. And it's the same thing that, when the Jews were emancipated from slavery and tyranny of Pharaoh, they had to go through the desert. That's the veteran conversation, is that, okay, you're out of the military. You no longer have this kind of slavery type mindset, but you understood, you belonged to something, and now you're in the desert, and there's nothing that is there to guide you. There's nothing there to create a worldview to direct your journey, and so, right. Metaphorically, that was when, Moses said, "Hey, we're following that pillar of smoke on the horizon, and here's your commandments." So that's the veteran experience of, I'm in the desert as a lone wolf. So what is my vision for the future? What are my values that now guide me, that are mine, as opposed to what the army gave me? And many veterans can be lost in that desert for years and years and years, and we've lost a lot of them since 9/11. We've lost under 8,000 soldiers to action, and in that same time frame, we've lost 150,000 to suicide.
Jesus, wow!
And those are the men who got lost in the desert, and at some point you give up, because if there's no pillar of smoke on the horizon and you have no commandments, you have no tribe. And that's the function of the pillar and the commandments, is that it keeps the tribe together so you can go on that journey.
Right.
The old African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
I love that. Well,
the journey through the desert.
I was going to bring this up before, but now it sounds like a bit inconsequential, put up to all the veterans that took their own lives. But I was going to say, when I first moved abroad and I didn't know anyone here, I was kind of without a tribe, without anyone here. Everyone I had met before had left. And so I had a full year of just going out to different events and networking areas and just meeting people. And it took me years to find people that I felt were part of my tribe, because if I was going to like entrepreneur communities, because I've had a couple companies, and I was trying to meet people within that tribe, a lot of them I'm like, okay, this guy's, his only guiding light is cash. And that was really not what I was doing it for. And so it took me a long time to find people within the different tribes I'm a part of in the world to be like, okay, these people of this tribe, these are my people. These are the people that I want to be around with. And so the hard part that I see of men that are only finding friends in these doing sort of areas.
And hey, Michael, just you used the word feel.
Yeah.
That's the root of it.
Okay.
Is you found a group of people that feels good,
Right.
and that's an emotion. Feeling is an emotion.
Right.
So whatever your personality or your priorities are in life, and you're going to find that tribe, right?
Right.
Whether it be, an intellectual tribe, a salon that you meet once a week and you do a book club and you unpack, heavy thoughts. Like that's a magician tribe that feels good to that archetype.
Right.
If you're a warrior class guy and you're looking for your tribe, then you want to hunt those tribes that are doing the things that make you feel,
Like you belong.
yeah. And so that's the crux of uh, finding that sense of belonging is you do have to have an understanding of yourself
Right.
before
Hmm.
you can integrate into a tribe. And that's the glory of our world now is there's an endless amount of tribes who are doing various things.
Right. And I think that's where kind of the Venn diagram between our two worldviews for friendship and collection is that belonging is the most important part of
Yep.
it. And I would love your opinion before we wrap up. I'd love your opinion on, because I think sometimes it's hard for men, let's say they're joining work or sports group or etc., that I hate that sometimes men always have to feel that they're in environments where they have to prove themselves, that they're only accepted and they're only belong if they're near the top of the pack or if they
Mm.
are one certain thing. Whereas I think at least in other friendships that may be more feminine, but I don't want to say that because they have their own issues. But like that they will just love each other and accept them each other just for being there. And so
Hmm.
maybe where we do agree is that it doesn't matter if it's friend for friendship's sake or the group of doing stuff, but as long as you feel like you're not always in threat, that you, like you said, you
Yeah.
feel good within those communities. Would-
Yeah. There's a kind of sweet spot of, um, and this is flow state,
Right,
where we have enough safety and belonging and control that we don't have anxiety, but we also have enough challenge in front of us where we're fully engaged,
right,
right? And if it's too easy, you're not being pushed, not being challenged, then there's complacency, which means you're out of flow state. But if you're overwhelmed and you're constantly stressed, then you have anxiety and you're not in flow state.
right,
So flow state is different for everyone based on your personality and your ability to engage with risk and challenge or your needs around safety and belonging. So it's different for everybody, but that's the goal when you're looking at a community is that you want to have safety and belonging and acceptance, but you also need the opportunity to be fully engaged. Like your best is required,
I
and
like that.
that when we can find those communities, that's when we're thriving. And so, and that's going to be different for everyone.
Right,
Um, and so, I may need more stress and ambition and accountability and challenge than my wife, for example. And so we have a different requirement to be in our flow state, which is arete or full engagement, um, self actualization. It's all the same shit.
hmm,
And we all have a different need for that. But understanding what that is and then finding a community that provides those two brackets, we thrive.
I love that. And to wrap up, I guess, how so people that maybe are struggling to find these tribes, because it sounds like finding these tribes is some of the biggest levers you can pull for resiliency. Would you agree with that?
It's one, yeah, belonging, number one.
Okay, so I guess for people that are struggling to find somewhere they belong or even to feel themselves so they even understand where that feels good, how would you recommend someone start to go down that path?
Well, everything starts with self. Leadership is self-leadership first. So there is an understanding of what our individual needs or requirements are in terms of being in a healthy, uh, relationship or community, and those will change over time. There's a tendency for adolescent people to drop into very codependent relationships, which are less resilient and they're less successful. And when people become more powerful, then they're claiming their independency from codependency, and there's going to be codependent people that are going to drop off from that journey. And ultimately, we need to be interdependent, which is, I have my own journey I'm on. I have a destiny to fulfill, and whatever it is, and that can be relationships, or it can be money, or it can be, whatever your journey is. Um, so you're gonna move from, circle to circle to circle throughout your life, and the people that move with you, well, they're on their own journey as well, and being able to maintain that bridge or that connection, um, that's a high level of humanity, and it sits above, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is self-actualization.
Right.
That's a pride-based or individual lone wolf centric model. Is that I finish my journey with self-actualization. That's not the indigenous model of human development. Above self-actualization is the elevation of the tribe. Everyone around you is better because of who you are and what you do. And then above that is um, perpetuating culture. Whatever the organization or team that you join or find, your job is to leave it better than you found it. You're, in Native American culture, you're thinking 7 generations in the future. That is, I think, the roadmap for significance, meaning, purpose. Is, looking at a much broader sense of why are we here. And it's to lift the members of the tribe who are around us, and to be an active participant in this human journey, whatever that is, right? Bringing consciousness back to the universe, um, expressing God and on earth, like whatever it is that we're here for. That's ultimately what we're moving towards.
So you're saying if people want to be in their self, find, I guess, a group that they can serve?
Ultimately, yeah. So everything's going to start with basic needs first. That's the bottom of Maslow. Hey, I need somebody, because if I'm a lone wolf, I starve. Okay, get in a group. Any group is better than lone wolfing.
Right.
And then at some point, when you start getting clarity around, well, I need more intellectual stimulation. Well, you're going to start finding those people who are doing that. Or I need more of a Marshall expression, or I need people who are more visionary, like whatever your truth is around what you're here on the planet for. You're going to find those groups that either augment or need you. They need what you bring to the table.
Right.
And so the belonging first, and then service second.
Okay. Well, you heard him, everybody. If you want to belong, start exploring different groups and see who you want to serve, and find yourself within them. Philip, thank you so much for this. People can find you at, I have here, valorresiliency.com, k4men.com, and mwolftribe.com.
My wolf tribe. I might have misspelled it.
Okay. mywolftribe.com. So please, it is a great logo. Find Philip and his group, and find your own group. And I wish you guys. So
and
much
hey,
belonging.
the roadmap for this whole conversation:
Yeah.
Team to Tribe.
For
On
those
Amazon.
listening, you sold like a book. It's called Team to Tribe: The Roadmap for Reclaiming Kinship and Success in Your Family and Career.
Ooh.
Pick it up. Thanks, Philip. I
There it is.
appreciate you being here.
All right, brother.
So thanks for listening to No More, No Less. I appreciate the time you spent with me today. So please subscribe and rate the show if you enjoyed it. It'll help me create more amazing content and get that next little bit of validation that I so deeply crave. If you did enjoy it, well, that sucks. But to make sure, I think you should listen to my next 10 episodes and then decide. I mean, come on. Rome was not built in a day. I'm just getting warmed up here, guys. So thanks again. See you next time.